ladies, dems, and femmes, and welcome to the second edition of Among Women, and a safe space for intergender conversation. On here is where we talk about all things girl and womanhood related. So if you are interested in such, please do hang out, like, subscribe, and share. On today's edition, I will be asking a question, and the question is, are women people? And I'm gonna be asking this question in the context of three themes. The first one is Christianity. Second is African cultural practices. Third is heteronormativity and the erasure of queer women. Now, in this video, I will not be answering this question. I'm going to set the guidelines for answering the question by legitimizing it as a question. I do know that there are people who will look at this video or at the title of the video and jump into the comments and be like, well, of course women are women. How could you? Of course women are people. How could you ask that? Or people who will very sarcastically be like, no, we're aliens masquerading as women, which as people, which I love you. Okay, but I do believe this is a valid question, and if you stick around till the end, I think I can give you, I can prove Christianity. So if you see me looking down, I have notes. It's not what? Yes, it's not a blank page. I have notes. And that's what I will be looking at if you see me looking down. And they're like birds outside, so if you see me looking, that's because the birds. Okay, so Christianity. In the Bible, in Genesis, it says that God made the world, right? God made the world, and there was nothing, and God created the world. And after God created the world, well, there's a bit of a contradiction. It says that God created men and women. So in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, again, it says that God created men and women in his image, both to have dominion over the earth. However, in chapter 2, right, verse 7, it talks about how God made Adam from the earth and breathed life into him, and then made Eve from his rib. And what this is already doing, just at the beginning, right, it's already creating the precedent that men have their own purpose. So God created Adam with his own purpose, which was to tend to the garden and to caretake over the animals and the fishes and the birds and all of these other things, right? Whereas Eve, who was made from Adam's rib, was made to be a helpmate and companion to Adam. And just right off the beginning, Eve has no individuality, but Adam does. And then it continues, right? So when the sin happens, kicked out of the garden, yada yada, and then Eve and Adam have kids, Cain, Abel, and later on Seth. When Cain, Abel, and Seth are old enough to get married, wives magically appear for them. Out of nowhere, these women appear, and there's no explanation as to where these women came from, what their lineage is. We know nothing, to the point where we don't even know their names. For people that study theological history and know all of these things, please do not be in the comments, because that's not the point of this video. For the rest of us who did not go through that, but would consider ourselves Christians, or would have considered ourselves Christians when I was one, reading the Bible, that is all the information we have. And in that information, Cain, Abel, and Seth's wives are not even worthy of being given a name, right? And so that is continuing this idea that women don't really have identities and they don't have their own individuality, and it continues throughout the book. and women are referred, like even the women that are really looked up to, like your Esther's, your Ruth, right? Like Rahab, or the women that aren't looked up to, the Jezebel, the Delilah, we know them in relation to the men in their lives, whether it's a father or a husband or a son, or like the person they were concubine to, right? Like that is the way in which we know them. We don't know them as their own individual being, which further continues this idea when you like go through all of it, which I know, and I'm gonna get to that. Like people, I used to be one of them, people who would use Proverbs 31 as a way to be like, well, like look at this woman and how like she was the original girl boss, like, and all of the things she was doing. I'm gonna get to that, but like in everything, again, Eve, Cain, Abel and Seth's wives, and all these other women, we only know them in relation to the men in their life, whether it is as it's like them as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, as a mistress or a concubine, as a sister. We only know them in relation to the men in their lives, not necessarily them as individuals, right? And so that is a further, like, I guess, sets the stage for women to not be viewed as individuals, right? And then like to get to the Proverbs 31 and how like some women, I used to be one of them, will use Proverbs 31 to say, well, like look at this woman and all of the things she was doing. She, like, women obviously had their own thing and all of these things, when it's like, did you read it? First and foremost, like the whole thing, because if you read the whole thing, you would know that you were talking about a fictional person. And like, please, for the people who are going to be like, well, the entire Bible is like, just for a second, let's pretend it's not, right? Like the woman in Proverbs 31 is not a real woman in the way some people would consider your Sarah, your Rahab, your Eve to be real people that like existed at some point in time. Even the people that don't believe in Christianity will still use the Adam and Eve excuse when being homophobic. So just like work with me. Let's not have too many discussions at the same time. Right. So, but the woman in Proverbs 31, right, is not a real person, because the woman in Proverbs 31 is King Leomel's mother's wish for her son. Right? It's the mother saying, this is the kind of, finding a good wife would be a good thing for you, my son. And by a good wife, this is what I mean. And even that, the fact that she is King Leomel's mother, she doesn't have a name, further reiterates my point that like women were not viewed as individuals within the context of the Christian religion, right? And so this woman is a fictional person. She's not a real person. She's just, this is what I hope you, my child, have. And then when you read the scripture, I'm going to have all the scriptures I'm talking about, I'm going to have screenshots of them somewhere here. And I'm going to put them up so you have them there. So of all the women, of all the things this woman does, and she's talking about like buying land, buying food from merchant ships, and like all of these things, dressing her family. Like this woman, like when does she sleep? Like when does she sleep? Because like it says that like her candle, she's up before the sun comes up, and her candle is lit into the night. Like she's just performing, she's constantly working, she's constantly serving her children, her husband, her community, which I don't necessarily think is bad. But when do you sleep, girl? and then like further on to say, like, again, fictional person, but also furthermore to say, then it says in the end, and I'd like tried, it seems to have changed, like I tried finding it says that like her husband is praised at the gates for her. So even when she's done all of these things, even when she's like been doing all of these things, they're great, they're amazing, the achievement is still not hers. It's her husband's achievement, because he achieved by acquiring her. Yeah. Yes. So in the context of Christianity as a religion, like that is my, like, where I'm putting it. It's like, in this way of describing women, of depicting women, is it depicting them as full people? Please show me the evidence if you have it. African tradition and cultural practices. So in the context of African traditions and cultural practices, which are actually very steeped in Christianity, right? So in the context of that, I'm going to speak to two things specifically. The first one being lobola, as well as the practice ya holaya, which are both part of the marrying process in African culture. Lobola, dowry, I think is like well known even for people who are not African, or like aren't, part of Black communities or African communities. You would be familiar with lobola, also known as dowry or mahadi, right? It's the practice. I'm not gonna like, because I'm not gonna do a good job. I'm gonna insult it, so I'm not gonna talk about what it is. But like, we are familiar with it, and so in the part of the lobola practice or the mahadi, like the negotiations and whatever, what often happens is families, yes, the clan names come in, sit, let's discuss, and even though people will tell you it is about unifying the families, in lobola negotiations, as someone who's been party to a few, what is discussed is what people in merchandising would call a product description. So it is, once people get to the like nitty gritty, the negotiations, it becomes like, well, our daughter is educated, our daughter doesn't have a child, or if she does have a child, it's by your son. Our daughter is this and this and this, and so we will charge 40 cows for her, or 20, or like whatever. Do you know? Like, and that people will then claim like, oh, we're not selling women, but then why is the product description? Right? So that practice, like, in African culture, which is not actually, like, if you do your history, if you read your history, like, is actually not part of African culture, but it's practiced by many African people. So I'm using it in this question, or like the setting for the context of the question, right? So in that, it is saying like, if you're not selling her, why is the conversation not about both families and what both individuals as well as both families, like the union of those two, right? Why is it, be aware, this is our family's medical history. Oh, and what is your family's medical history? It's not things like do people have debt? Like, it's not like your financial, right? It's not those things. It's like, well, our daughter has done 1 2 3 4 5, and therefore we would like this much for her, which sets the precedent for the idea of like, well, then aren't like women, which for me, okay, let me put it this way. For me, it's like, what you're saying is that a woman is property, and you are exchanging the woman, which is how the practice came to be, by the way. It was an exchange of property between two men, being a father and a husband. So this is an exchange of property, and women are therefore not people, because you don't have a product description for a person. You do not negotiate for a person without them being there. First and foremost, you don't negotiate for a person, full stop. But you don't negotiate for a person without them being there and actually having their own input, right? And so that is another thing. And then with regards to the practice of holaya, which I'm gonna put a video in here somewhere, and we're gonna actually we're gonna watch the video and then we're gonna come back and talk. So in the video that you've just seen, there is a young woman who is getting married, and she's a woman. I don't know how old or young she is. She's sitting there, and the elders in the family are giving her instructions as to what makes a good wife and how she should be a good wife. This practice is done, right, and has been done in African culture for a while, and it is only, to my knowledge, it is only done with women to tell them how to be good wives, but there's no that for men. If it happens, I don't know about it. There's no that for men. And a lot of what women are told, like when they're being lied, one of these women things that they're told is that is like basically to accept abuse. Like even on the video alone, you get it. Like she can't question him going out. She's just up, like, you know. So that is the second part of like this. So heteronormativity and the erasure of queer women. So I'm actually gonna put the definition of heteronormativity somewhere here, and you can read that definition. So in the context of like this theme, I'm actually going to start with something that I don't think people would put under this, which would be women who choose not to have kids or get married, like, and by choice, right? And I've been seeing, because it's been showing up on my social media a lot, like not only just women who are choosing not to have children or get married, but the outrage, right, that people have at women saying, well, I don't want to get married and I don't want to have kids. And what, like, people are like giving all of these many like excuses, and like, oh, like, especially for like black people, and the idea of like, well, like your lineage, and like black people are running out, like, what? Anyway, your people are giving all of these many excuses, but what it boils down to is the idea that, like, if you're a woman and you decide not to have kids and not to get married, people are like, then why are you here? What is the point of you existing if you're not going to be of service to a man or impregnated by a man? Then what is the point of you being alive, right? And again, people will try and mask it in many different ways and say like many different things, but that is what it boils down to, the question of like, then why are you alive? Like, why are you here? Why do you exist? Right. And I know people would not put, like, though this may not be seen as something to do with queerness or like, I guess, like anti-heteronormativity, if, well, like, maybe it would make sense in the sense of anti-heteronormativity, but like it's the idea that like this is how things are supposed to be, and this thing how things are, and this how things are supposed to be. And so when you as a woman decide that you don't want to have kids and don't want to get married, what you're doing is you're upsetting the status quo. Third and final part. So firstly, if the camera moves, it's because I'm holding the phone. I had to change location because of like lighting. I'm using natural light and the sun moves, so I had to switch to a different position. And then I also had to stop so I could eat. I was not aware what time it was, so I had to stop so I could eat. And there are people in the house. background noise, that's what you're hearing. Okay, so third and final. Hopefully I can get it done this time. That was long, probably messy. I'm gonna do my best while editing. But in the context of that, if you were able to make it all the way to the end, in the context of everything I have said, please answer the question: are women people? And if so, please bring me your own reasons why you believe, in the context of the things that I mentioned, women are seen as people. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to talking to you in the comments.